of the Poultry Knowledge Day for the invitation to come over here. I'm very, very happy to come back again to India, which I have spent in the last few years a lot of time. So today we're going to have a look on the infectious bronchitis, which is one of my preferred subjects. Mainly we're going to focus on diagnosis and control, and we're going to also have a review on the disease and the historical past of it. So, as I have been introduced, for the last 7 years, this has been my area of work, pretty much all Asia, from Pakistan to Japan, and from China to Indonesia, and I've had a lot of opportunities to work with some of you across the region. The contents of my presentation, we're going to have a look on the current situation of bronchitis, then we're going to look at the pathology, then we're going to have a look on diagnosis with a little bit of emphasis on ELISA, which is where I'm working lately with more focus, and then on how to control this very important disease. Current situation, all of us, we know bronchitis is a coronavirus, and it is everywhere in Asia. It is almost a plague. From 2000 to 2013, we have been experiencing a lot of problems with the different variants. And many of you have been with me out in the field looking at very severe cases of losses in production, of big mortalities in the broilers, and it continues being a very important problem in our operations. I always say that on the early 2000s, I think that bronchitis was overlapped with avian influenza and Newcastle disease. Because as I always say, if you are bleeding from your neck, you do not really care about a nail in your toes that you are bleeding. So AI and Newcastle disease, they were at that time the most important ones. And I think that it was very, very overlapped by these two important diseases, and it went kind of undetected. However, as I mentioned before, from that time and onwards, let's say 2007, 2008, we started to get much more or many more field cases on this. I went to visit customers that they were having very severe problems. One thing also with bronchitis is that it commonly is in combination with what we call here CRD, the combination with Mycoplasma, either Gallisepticon or Synoviae, with avian pneumovirus, and sometimes also in conjunction with ORT plus E. coli. Something that always is a big problem, and I will be talking a little bit later on, is the lack of diagnostic facilities that really makes confirmation very, very difficult in this region. However, something that I would like to say, because also I saw the number of egg output in the broiler breeders from my previous company when I worked for Biochek, is that in the last few years, the losses have been reduced by applying correct control techniques. When I first arrived here in Asia, 2007, I used to see flocks that they peak on around 40 or 45 and 50%. So I remember going to a flock in China that it almost had to be, I actually had to be a slaughter because it peaked only at 38%. However, and still I meet with my GBT colleagues from the Global Veterinary Technical Group, I still believe it's the #1 respiratory disease in the field. Yes, AI causes very high mortality. Yes, Newcastle disease causes high mortality, but that insidious disease that we have in our farms is still infectious bronchitis. Still, not just one snapshot, because if we do one snapshot, very, very difficult to do the interpretation. So I always said avoid firefighting. I used to do a lot of firefighting in my previous job in Biochek, going to see customers, and it's always nice when they have a good scheduled program where you can see variations in the ELISA titers. Very important, the number of samples to collect. So if you collect 5 samples, definitely it's very difficult to interpret ELISA. The ELISA is always a flock interpretation, so you cannot go and do interpretation of, oh, one bird, it has a 30,000 titer in ELISA, so this flock has bronchitis. So it's not for individual birds. It is very sensitive, but it has low specificity. And one thing that it happens is that it detects all the different serotypes. So as I mentioned before, if we want to know what serotype we are dealing with, we definitely need to go to virus neutralization or to M-agglutination inhibition or do PCR with sequencing to know exactly what do we have. And very important usually in ELISA, which it has been very useful for me, and it has been a nightmare in the past when I used to go to fix problems for customers, was that you generally need to run the whole respiratory panel. Because sometimes, as we mentioned before, bronchitis can be in conjunction with mycoplasma or with some of the other pathogens. And something that we always have to have in mind is that ELISA has limitations, so definitely, as I mentioned, you need to know what is the serotype, you cannot go and run ELISA and think that you're going to know if it's QX or if it's 491. Sometimes I get people asking me, do you think that if you have a titer of 3,700 is QX, and if you have 3,300 is 491? Well, I don't really know. I mean, you cannot say it like that. If I would have to say yes or not, I would say yes. I have experience with many customers that they do apply it. But you need to be careful, because it depends how do you apply it. For instance, in an enclosed house, like in your, if you have cages like you have, and you go and you spray it, if you spray with very fine with very fine particle size, then it can go very deep into the respiratory tissue, and then you can cause a reaction into it that actually could lead even to a decrease in the egg performance, egg production. But generally, if I would have to say yes or not, I would say yes. When? It depends, as I said before in my presentation, your titer. And so you need to know how your titers oscillate. General terms, it's usually between 4 to 6 to 8 weeks when you revaccinate. And I have had customers that they have revaccinated with mass strain, I mean H120, MA5, I mean any of the mass type. And also I have had customers, and I still have customers, that they revaccinate with some of the variants. I think that it creates a broader spectrum of protection.